Hey everybody, nice to see you. I am Melanie at HomePro. We had a little Zoom difficulty. Barbara, will you make Daniel a panelist so he can talk with us as well? We have Daniel from Sweetwater Pool Services, who is going to help us learn about all things pool ownership. I'm about to share my screen. See if we can get Daniel on. There he is. Daniel, will you unmute and say hello to everybody?
Hello, everybody.
All right. When we're on the webinar, we don't get to see y'all's face, but we're recording this. We will send you the recording when we are finished. And so you'll be able to remember all the things Daniel said. We built a little PowerPoint so we can show you some of the pictures related to it. So let me start by sharing my screen. If you all have questions, if you'll put them in the Q&A, Daniel will stay after and answer questions so that we make sure we answer your questions. One of the reasons I wanted to do this webinar in the first place is we have noticed a ton of pool inspections. Daniel handles our pool inspections in our Atlanta market. And it seems like when the pandemic hit and everybody had to stay at home, they were like, you know what? I would really like to be able to have a pool there. And so we've been going crazy in terms of our pool inspections. And so I thought, and then I had also considered owning a pool right before the pandemic. And I reached out to Daniel and said, what do I need to know about owning a pool? And it strikes me as something that a lot of your buyers, they may land with a house that has a pool and they don't know whether they want to own it or not, or maybe they think they want a pool and it's a place they're going to probably come ask you for information. And so I thought the more information you have, the better we all are. I'm making sure that it's showing the right screen. 1 second. I can't think and chew bubblegum at the same time. Okay. So with that, we are going to talk about what people should know before they take the plunge in pool ownership. I will tell you as a home inspector, what I know is that buyers don't really want to report. Like the thing I'm selling, nobody wants it. They don't really want to know all the things wrong with anything, but they also want certainty. And there's no way you can get certainty without an inspection report. And so we're going to focus today on pool inspections. We actually take the administrative part out of it for you and sub it out to Sweetwater, who delivers really great reports and really great service. And so it makes life easier for you and your client because we become the one-stop shop. And so Daniel will tell us a little bit more about his process. So Daniel, tell us about your background and a little bit about Sweetwater.
Great. Thanks, Melanie. Yeah, so I am a company executive for Sweetwater Pools. We're based out of Tucker, just on the east side of Atlanta. I personally have been in the business for about 12 years. I started out as a lifeguard when I was in college, believe it or not. I do have a background in education, so this is actually right up my alleyway to be doing this with y'all today. Unfortunately, I'm not in the classroom, but I thoroughly enjoy what I do for Sweetwater as well. So there's that. Sweetwater is a full-service company based in Atlanta that offers maintenance, repairs, renovations, service, and staffing for a mixture of commercial pools. So think homeowners associations, your neighborhood pools, country clubs, apartment complexes, things like that, as well as residential, which we consider to be all of your backyard pools. We've been in business for over 20 years now. And we've built up our reputation such that we have grown into additional market areas, Nashville, Charleston, Greenville, Savannah, for example, among a few others. I am tasked with heading up our entire residential team in the Atlanta area. So I sort of oversee all the operations and growth and development of our residential team in Atlanta. And part of that involves me partaking in continuing education classes, seminars similar to this one that are industry-based, and things that are just going to be able to help me grow and improve and keep up with the times on what's going on in our industry. So part of that is partnering with companies like HomeProbe to offer services that maybe they're not able to offer directly, or services that perhaps we just have a better niche for. So we have always advocated for pool inspections during the real estate process. We've partnered with groups like Keller Williams, and a few other brokerages as well, to try to offer their agents information like we're sharing today, that's going to better help you assist your clients and your buyers and sellers through the process. So part of that is the pool inspection. What's going on with the pool? You're buying a home with a pool. You need to know the ins and outs of it, anticipated maintenance costs, based on the type of pool that you have, the equipment that you have. All of that plays a big role in trying to determine cost of ownership for these investments, and that's really what they are, is they're investments. A lot of buyers, especially if they've never owned a pool before, really have absolutely no idea what they're walking into with a pool. And so these inspections really will help them gain a better understanding of what they're walking into. So the things that we do consider are the type of pool, right? So by type of pool, we mean, is this a standalone pool? Is it a pool and spa combo where the spa, and you probably have seen them, where the spa spills back over into the pool, right? Type of pool, construction makeup. Is this concrete, vinyl, fiberglass? What is the pool made of? One of the more common questions that we get is this a heated pool? Is this salt water? Is it chlorine? What are we looking at here? And then the next, probably most common question is, what's the maintenance like? How much is this going to cost me to maintain on an annual basis? What am I looking at for repairs? What am I looking at for if I want to do this myself versus hire a pool company to do it for me? What does all this look like for pool ownership? And so we have a pretty detailed inspection process that we've developed over the last decade or so, that goes through the ins and outs of the pool to help give you a general overview of what's going on with this particular pool that your buyers are interested in. And we're going to touch on the different processes and things that we're looking at here shortly, but we're looking at the filtration system. Think of that like the electrical systems and the HVAC in the home, right? But the filtration system for the pool. The pool itself, the interior of the pool, the surface material, if it's got tile, the lighting, sort of the condition of those things. And then what we refer to as the exterior, or the deck and surrounding areas. What kind of condition is the pool deck in? Right down to the perimeter fence that most folks don't realize is a requirement in most districts for safety purposes and liability. And then of course, what kind of repairs are we looking at, and what are those costs? So, we kind of walk all of our clients through that with this inspection report. So the different types of pools to consider, you've got three main types of pool construction. Two of the more common and cheaper construction types are going to be fiberglass. Most folks have seen those. Those are pre-molded in a factory somewhere, and they arrive on a truck, and then they literally get craned into the backyard and set in place into a hole that was dug, plumbed in, and away you go. Vinyl is very similar. They can be a little bit more custom, depending on the pool and the builder. Sometimes they will actually build the vinyl and glue the vinyl in place in the pool as they're installing it, whereas others will have the vinyl liner pre-built from the manufacturer based on measurements and specifications that are given. Gunite pools, also known as concrete pools or plaster or pebble, depending on what area you're from, but they're all about the same. These are also a very common construction type, right? So obviously the differences there speak for themselves. One is made of fiberglass, one is made of vinyl, one is made of concrete. So from there, we can start looking at the different costs of ownership for each. Fiberglass, after 10, 15 years, you're going to be looking at redoing the gel coat because it's going to start to blister on you or start chalking up. Vinyl, again, also 10, 15 years, you're probably looking at replacing the liner for the pool. That might look at $4, $5, $6,000 depending on how big your pool is. The concrete, the gunite, replastering your pool. Well, that's kind of like redoing your bathroom or your kitchen and trying to decide what type of countertops you want. Are you going to go with laminate? Are you going to go with quartz, marble, or granite, right? Same thing with the pools. You got to look at, are you looking at basic white plaster, or are you going to step it up a little bit and maybe do a quartz finish, or are you going to upgrade even more and go with a pebble surface? And then when you start getting into the pebble surfaces and the quartz, then you have to determine, okay, well, now what color do I want? And the color will determine a cost, right? Where is the stone coming from? Is it coming from Chile? Is it coming from Florida? For example, our average renovation project right now to resurface a pool, redo the tile, coping, things like that, we're averaging $20,000, $25,000 for your average renovation project on a gunite pool. But depending on the materials you choose, that might last 10 years, it might last 40 years. And a lot of that is also dependent upon your maintenance routine. I don't recall what the next slide is off the top of my head, but let's go ahead. So
we're going to talk about the water supply. Tell us a little bit, one more thing on these different types of pools. You said fiberglass and vinyl were a little bit less expensive. Does that mean
correct.
To install, or does that mean to maintain?
So the maintenance routine is going to be generally the same regardless of the type of pool. All of the pools need to have the water balanced. All of them need to have the equipment maintained. All of them need to have proper circulation and various things that all pools generally need. It's more so the cost, the initial cost to install them, right? The labor cost for a gunite pool is going to be much higher than vinyl or fiberglass by virtue of how they're constructed. A gunite pool, you're having concrete that is literally hand troweled and shot into the pool. Some folks may be familiar with the phrase shotcrete. It's literally shot through hoses with compressed air and then troweled down to form the shape of the pool. Vinyl, these are great pools because they're inexpensive. You don't have the cost of the concrete. You don't have the cost of the masons for most of them. And they're very easy to replace the liner when the time comes. So you're more so looking at those long-term costs and the initial investment when it comes to the repairs and things like that for these different pools. But the maintenance is going to be about the same for all of them.
Okay, let's talk about the water types. So I hear a lot of preferences. It seems like this is a polarizing subject. People prefer their salt water, and some are like the salt just does the same thing as the chlorine. So tell us more.
Great question. So the thing to understand is a saltwater pool is still a chlorine pool. When we make the distinction between saltwater and chlorine, what we're really saying is what type of chlorine are we using and how are we introducing it to the water. With a traditional chlorine pool, most folks are familiar with granulated shock and chlorine tablets that look like little white hockey pucks. That's your traditional chlorine pool. The chemistry that's done, the other chemicals that are needed with the pool will change based on chlorine or saltwater. With a saltwater pool, what you're doing is you're using a process called electrolysis, taking everybody back to high school chemistry, and you're literally converting table salt, sodium chloride, into liquid bleach that is then introduced into the pool. And you're doing that right there on site with a piece of equipment installed at the filtration system. So the benefit of salt water is that you don't have to manually add chlorine to the pool every single week. It's producing it for you right there. But you have a different type of water chemistry and different chemicals that are needed to maintain the water. So there's a common misconception that, oh, I've got a saltwater pool. All I do is add salt to the water, and that's all I have to do. And that's just not the case by any means. Unfortunately, that was a marketing campaign that was done 2 or 3 decades ago when saltwater becoming more and more prevalent, but in order to get people to invest in it, but that's just simply not the case. If the buyers plan on maintaining the pool themselves, they can indeed save some money by maintaining the pool themselves. But from a chemical perspective and the cost of chemicals, they're really not going to be saving much money just by having salt water alone. There's other things that they can do that I won't get into today that can help them save money with salt water. But by and large, the long-term cost of ownership between chlorine and salt water is about the same. The average saltwater system will run anywhere between $1,500 to $1,800, depending on the system. Whereas you can buy a $20 tablet floater that just floats around in the pool to put your chlorine tablets in, right? So cost of buying chlorine versus the initial investment of the saltwater system that gets installed. So you have a lot of trade-off in cost, but long-term it's about the same.
That's helpful. Is there a safety difference in terms of one of them being better for you, better for your skin or your hair? Or?
So when you start getting into the nuances of water chemistry, there is a significant difference in the type of chlorine that is in the water, right? So traditional chlorine tablets are a chemical compound is called trichlor, and it makes the water very acidic, which is often why folks get out of the pools and they feel dried out, a little bit itchy, those sorts of things. Whereas with salt water, you're producing liquid chlorine, which if you, again, go back to high school chemistry, you'll know that liquid bleach is very high on the pH scale, which will feel more slippery. You don't get out feeling, all dehydrated and itchy. And on the molecular level, it's just a different type of chlorine that's added to the water. So that's why some folks will say they prefer the salt water, because maybe they have a sensitivity to the trichlor, or vice versa. Maybe they have a sensitivity to the liquid bleach, but not the trichlor. So some folks may prefer chlorine over the salt water.
Cool. That's really helpful. All right, so let's talk about what do we have to do to make our pool not look like this? What does it look like in a month, in a year, and in maybe 10-year chunks? This was a real pool at one of the houses we inspected. I am not kidding.
Yes, this is a great picture. So, so a lot of trying to prevent this is just your general upkeep. If you think about a car, for example, if you park a car in your driveway for a full year without turning it on, without moving it, without doing anything to it, and then you come back a year later, it's going to be covered in dust and dirt. It's probably not going to crank on the first try. The tires will probably be low on air. You may have an oil leak, all kinds of problems with it. Then if you had just done some of the basic preventative maintenance over time, even if you're not using your car, most folks will tell you that, hey, go ahead and spin it around the block, once every other week or so, and just get the tires moving, get the fluids moving, so forth and so forth. It's the same thing with a pool. If you leave your pool closed down for long periods of time, greater than a winter season, for example, you're going to start running into problems that look like this. Now, this is obviously maybe, a decade's worth of growth in this pool. So this is sort of an extreme example, but it does highlight the point that just keeping the pool full and keeping those pumps running and doing even the bare minimum of water chemistry will definitely prevent something like this. This looks like it would have been a vinyl liner pool. And I can tell you that this is easily $20,000 or more to fix and get up and running, just looking at the photo, based on having to clear out all of the debris, reconstruct the slopes in the floor, replace the liner. The equipment probably needs to be replaced, just a bunch of other things that, without even looking at the equipment, I can tell it's probably going to be needed for this particular pool.
So generally, do pools get serviced? I didn't end up with a pool, so I don't know this. Do pools get serviced whether you do it or you hire someone to do it every month?
So we advocate for general maintenance. And for us, that's vacuuming the pool, testing your water chemistry, making the adjustments, those sorts of things. At a minimum of once per week, whether it be us or you, the homeowner, or your client, or what have you, a minimum of once per week during the summer months, those things should be done to prevent your pool from turning green on you and starting looking like the swamp or the lake. During the off season, when the weather starts to cool down, depending on whether or not you keep the pool open and operational, or if you winterize it. If you keep it open, we recommend a minimum of every other week. If you have a lot of trees around the pool, during the fall season, you may decide to keep it maintained once weekly until the leaves quit falling, but you're at less risk of things like algae and other contaminants during the winter months when the water gets colder. If you winterize the pool, that's going to involve, putting the cover on, disassembling the equipment, clearing all of your plumbing of all the water to prevent freeze damages, things like that. You can winterize your pool and safely leave it for 6 to 7 months, until late spring when you're ready to get it back up and running and use it again. So, in that regard, it's really personal preference, especially when we're in the Southeast. Up north, they have to winterize the pools up north, but then you start getting south into Florida and other, southern market areas, coastal markets, they keep their pools open year round. But in the Georgia area, I would say only about a third of our customers actually fully close and winterize their pools. And it's really personal preference. So,
Okay. And do you have a general estimate, like a range you would give somebody in what to expect from a pool that doesn't need repairs? What would they expect to spend servicing and maintaining in a year?
So if they want to do it themselves, they have the desire to learn how to maintain the equipment and do the basic cleaning tasks that are needed in the water chemistry. At a bare minimum, they're still going to have the cost of chemicals that they're going to have to buy at their local pool retailer. So, your chlorine, your acids, and salt, and whatever else the pool might need. So on average, the DIY guy that doesn't need any repairs this year and the pool's looking great, I would expect anywhere between $700 and $1,400 extra per year just for the chemicals. Okay. And then the cost of energy to run the pump during the summer months is also going to be somewhat dependent upon the size of the pump. But you're going to look at an extra $500 to $600 or $700 a year on energy costs just to run those pumps. So the average DIY guy, you're looking at $1,500, $2,000 a year just to run your pumps and buy the chemicals. If you're going to hire a pool service company to do it for you, right now, the way the market is for pool service, I would anticipate your annual cost to be in the neighborhood of $4,000 to $5,000 extra per year going through a pool service company. So, $300 to $400 a month on average for a professional pool service company to maintain it. And that's doing it once a week during the summer, every other week during the off season, or doing the weekly summer service, opening and closing the pool and maintaining it during the off season. So different companies offer different types of services and different levels of service. But on average, I would anticipate the DIY guy, $1,500 a year or so average. And then the person that hires a professional pool company, $4,000 to $5,000 a year or so for basic maintenance.
Okay. Let's talk about what you do when you inspect a pool, when someone's deciding whether to own this house with this pool. And so talk a little bit about your inspection. I've gotten some of the report broken down, but you can just give us an overview of it.
Great. So this is a real inspection report that we did for y'all earlier this year on a pool. And when we go out and we look at a pool, the goal is to get as much information off the pool as possible in terms of what type of pool is this, right? You can see there, this particular one was a pool and spa combo. It has shared equipment. The spa size, this particular one had a free-form spa. Is it heated? Is it salt water? What's the depth of the pool? Pool volume, things of that nature. What's the construction makeup? What's the water quality when we get there? Sometimes we will go ahead and test your water chemistry depending on circumstances. If I feel it needs to be tested, sometimes we don't always test the water, but that doesn't always make a big difference. But we're trying to give you a basic overview of what's going on with this pool, what type of pool it is. This way, If they decide they want to hire somebody, even if it's not Sweetwater, whomever they decide to hire to maintain the pool, they can take our inspection report, hand it to their new pool service company, and say, this is what we have. And the pool guy will be able to know exactly what this pool is, how to properly quote the service, and how to get the repairs done for them as quickly as possible. So that way their pool contractor has to ask as minimal questions as possible to get the information they need to help their client. So
And people aren't guessing, right?
exactly.
So
Part of that, like right here, for example, the filtration equipment, we try to include as much information about the equipment as possible. So what type of equipment are we looking at? So, what's the automation and control system like? This particular pool has a Jandy Aqualink. I know that doesn't mean much to most of y'all, but to the pool guy, this means everything to them. They'll know exactly what this is. The type of filter, they had a cartridge filter. They've got a booster pump for their Polaris. What type of filtration pump, what type of sanitizer, right? So this one was a saltwater pool. So what type of saltwater system is it? The part numbers, the serial numbers, any relevant notes about it. Those sorts of things. They can literally hand this to their pool guy and say, hey, my motor went out on the pump. I don't know what I need. And the pool guy can look at this and go, okay, it's a Jandy Flow Pro 1.5 horsepower. I know exactly what I need to fix this pump. And then the next part of that is going over the basic condition of the pool system, the different various components, right? So the first part of this inspection report offers a grade level of poor, fair, good. Is it in excellent condition, or is it applicable? And sometimes we'll mark if we're able to even assess it based on various circumstances. But you can see here, this is all related to the circulation system or the filtration system of the pool. So we're grading it, and then generally speaking, anything that's in fair or poor condition or unable to assess, you're going to see notes right underneath there about why we graded it that way, right? So if you look, you can see that the electrical system and the automation and all that was in poor condition, but then I immediately made a note about why it was this way.
okay.
The automation panel is in disarray. It's not installed in a safe manner. We do include photos of all of this as well. The photos are labeled so you know what you're looking at. So there would have been a photo attached with this in the photos section of the report that shows the automation panel, that shows the wiring, and you can see how unsafe it is and how unsecure all the wiring is. So then the next thing we look at is the interior of the pool, the interior condition. So the plaster finish. I think we'll show a picture here in a few minutes of the pool, but at first glance, the plaster to the untrained eye looks like it's probably in good condition, looks like it's just a little bit dirty, probably just needs to be vacuumed, right? But upon closer inspection, you start looking and you can see that the plaster is very rough, it's worn. The waterline tile, the border tile that's right at the top of the plaster or the top of the pool, it's falling off, it's cracked. And in this instance, you can see that resurfacing and tile should be done. The lighting for the pool, what kind of lighting do they have? So this particular pool, they had fiber optic lighting, which is outdated, and this particular pool doesn't work. They stopped installing fiber optics in pools about 20 years ago. So, there's upgrade options available for it. But it might require significant work as noted here in the summary. But you can see that the rest of everything else was in pretty good condition, the skimmers and the so forth and so forth. So
things that surprised me when I was going to say one of the things that surprised me when you told me about the deck and surrounding, because you said you really work on it, but you said it affects insurance and like the legal requirements. So tell us about that.
Right. So the perimeter fence, for example, the vast majority of residential districts, always double check with what your local laws are, but because the codes vary from district to district based on the property type as well, the size of the property. But in general, you always want to have a fence that is a border between the property and the pool to prevent unauthorized access, and not so much adults, but mostly children. Preventing children from being able to access the pool unmonitored and unknown to the owner of the property, right? You can imagine a child that wanders into the backyard that contains a pool, what that liability might look like for the insurance company, for the city, for the homeowner, right? God forbid anything happens, that child falls in the pool, can't get out, whatever the case may be. I don't want to be morbid, but it's extremely important that you make sure that your property and your pool is secured from unauthorized access. And part of that is making sure that the fence around the property is in good condition. That's why nearly every single property you see with a pool has some type of barrier, some type of fence that surrounds it in one form or another. So we're not a fencing contractor and we don't install fences, but it's easy enough for me to walk around the perimeter and find access points that a child could fit through, or if the gate, for example, doesn't latch properly or or is broken completely. So in situations like that, even though this pool was noted as good for the perimeter fence, I am going to make a recommendation that the buyer contact the fencing contractor to more evaluate and get a better idea of what's needed to repair it, right? So going back to the decking, this particular pool, well, you can see there in the notes that the deck had a decorative coating on it, but it was coming up. Some portions of it were what we call delaminating, where it's literally peeling up and creating some jagged edges in the deck, which poses a safety hazard for folks that are walking around the deck barefoot. Right, so that's another liability to be aware of, safety issues like that. So what's the cost to fix that? Well, we will work on decking. So this is something that I would have included a repair cost estimate for at the bottom of the inspection report.
We'll get to that in just a second.
Yes.
I thought it would be really fascinating. So these, Daniel sent me 2 sample inspection reports, and the price differential in the repairs was shocked me. So Daniel, tell us about what maybe the untrained eye is seeing, and then we'll look at your cost estimates. You can talk some about the repairs that you see often.
So I wanted to sort of compare and contrast 2 very different pools that look similar, and at first glance look also similar in terms of what they may or may not need. So the pool on the left is a pool and spa combo. It's a fiberglass spa with a vinyl pool. So the left side pool there is a vinyl pool, meaning it's got a vinyl liner for the surface material. And the spa will spill back over into the pool depending on how the valves are set for the filtration system, right? And then the pool on the right is also a pool and spa combo, but this is a gunite concrete pool. So this one has plaster. It's got your traditional border tile, and it's got white plaster as its finished surface material, right? So they look very similar in construction to the untrained eye, but the construction types are very different, and both of these pools need very different things in terms of repairs. So the pool on the right, the inspection report samples we were just looking at were actually from that particular pool, but you can see here the pool on the right needed a significant amount of repairs. The deck resurfacing, the coping needed to be done, the plaster needed to be done. This is the one that needed the new automation system, all the equipment, the wiring. Basically, this pool needed to be gutted and completely redone, with the exception of the shell of the pool, pretty much. So to the tune of almost $51,000 there for repairs, versus the pool on the left. The repair cost there, if I remember correctly, that one, just all that needed to be done on that one were the lights just needed to be replaced because they weren't working, because they were just old. But that pool, it's interesting to note the equipment for the pool on the left was much older than the pool equipment on the right, but the one on the right had not been maintained properly, right? So the equipment for the pool on the left was easily 15, 20 years old. The equipment on the right, that equipment was 5 to 10 years old, but had worn itself out because it wasn't maintained properly. Right? So just like everything else in life, how you maintain things really help determine the longevity that you get out of it, right? So when you're looking at the pool on the right, the buyer looks at it and goes, oh, the pool looks like it's in pretty good shape. The water's just a little funky, but we'll hire someone just to clean up the pool and it'll be good to go. Well, not so much. So this is why we advocate for these inspection reports because, $1,200 more often than not for the pool on the left is usually not enough to deter a buyer. It doesn't really give you a whole lot of leverage in this market for getting concessions from the seller, things like that. But the pool on the right, when they see, oh man, $50,000, that's basically like having to redo your kitchen and your bathroom, or having to finish a basement. And that's a significant cost. Some folks may need to take a loan out to get that done, right? So that very well could deter a buyer looking at those potential costs, especially if the rest of the home needs additional work as well.
Thank you. And that's the whole point of a home inspection, right? And that's why when there is a pool, one of the reasons that we collaborate with Daniel is because we want to make sure buyers get the best information that they can. We're going to stay after and answer questions. I'm going to tell you if you want to, if you need a pool inspection with your home inspection, these are the ways to book an inspection and just tell us that you need a pool. Daniel will actually give you a discount if you are working with us. He will go more places than he normally goes and discounts his rate a little bit if you work with us. Daniel, if somebody wants to work with you just for servicing and they don't need the inspection, what's the best way to reach out for Sweetwater?
So our inspection reports, if they do inspection through us or through us, our inspection reports do have our contact information on it. But our office number, with simple Google search, Sweetwater Pools of Atlanta. Our office number is 770-939-5757. And then if it's during business hours, you'll get a live person who will answer the phone and direct you appropriately. Otherwise, you can follow the prompts to get to the appropriate person if it's an after hours call. We do go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just to say we do operate normal business hours Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So we always have office staff available at that time. But our contact information is also located in the inspection reports.
Cool. What's your availability like for turnaround on inspections?
So if you're interested in doing a pool inspection, we will go anywhere that Home Pro goes in the greater Atlanta area. So if you call us directly and it's not in our service area, we're going to tell you no. But if you go through Home Pro, we'll go ahead and schedule it for you through Home Pro, just as a part of our partnership agreement. But the turnaround time, generally speaking, is going to be dependent upon the location as well as the time of week. So if you submit the request on a Friday afternoon, for example, it's probably going to be Monday or Tuesday before we can get the inspection done, versus if you submit the inspection request maybe Tuesday. Usually it's a 24 to 48 hour business hour turnaround on getting the on-site inspection completed. And then we generally ask for 1 business day to turn around the report. So if we did the inspection, for example, on a Wednesday afternoon, typically by Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon, we're getting the report done. If you need the report done in the same day because of due diligence constraints, all we ask is that you let us know ahead of time so we can make the appropriate notes when we're scheduling it. And we can generally accommodate a same day report as long as we're aware of it.
Cool. All right, let's go to the question and answers. You're going to give the answers. They're going to give the questions. So everybody, if you don't have questions, you're welcome to leave. But if you do, Daniel will stay and answer them for a little bit for us. Somebody mentioned that there was a recent chlorine shortage. Is that still happening?
It is. So back in August of 2020, unfortunately, this was not actually even a COVID issue. So while everybody loves to blame COVID for shortages and supply chain issues, unfortunately, this was not a COVID issue. Hurricane Laura that came back in August of 2020 hit Louisiana. And long story short, one of the major manufacturing plants for chlorine that supplied about 60% of all solid chlorine to the entire nation was hit by the hurricane and it burnt to the ground. So because of that, just for some simple perspective, wholesale summer of 2020, I was paying about $75 for a 50-pound drum of chlorine tablets. Today, if and when we can find them, I am now paying over $200 for a 40-pound drum of chlorine tablets. So you can see how dramatically those costs have driven up. So Most of the manufacturers are prioritizing wholesale distribution centers for the service industry side of the pool industry. And so because of that, there's been a large shortage of chlorine in the retail side. So some areas are hit harder than others based on where they're located in relation to the plants. So some folks haven't really been affected much in terms of supply, but they have definitely seen the cost increase.
Okay, interesting. So it makes it a little tougher to do the DIY in the areas that are affected.
Correct. This year alone, I've had probably a half a dozen different discussions with potential new customers about, what their cost is, and they'll walk into Leslie's Pool Supplies, the largest pool and spa retailer of equipment and chemical supplies in the nation. They'll walk out every single time spending $300-400 on chemicals, and so by the time they look at their annual cost, they're $700-1,400, like I was discussing earlier, just to buy their chemicals. And then when they look at my costs, when we do service for our customers, we line item the chemical costs for their service plan with us, and they're paying us $700-800 or whatever the cost is for that pool, and it's pretty close to the same. The big difference is, of course, we're adding it for them in the proper doses. We're making the measurements on site, so we're basically taking all the guesswork out for them, but they're still paying the cost through us instead of going to the retailers.
Cool. All right. Forrest wants to know if you have he has a client considering installing a pool from scratch. Are you able to provide a broad range of what to expect?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So while we are not builders, Sweetwater is not a dedicated builder. We do partner with other builders in the area, and we have a list of recommended builders around the greater Atlanta area. But in general, again, going back to the type of pool being built, if you're looking at building a concrete pool, don't expect anything less than 6 figures for cost. If you're looking at fiberglass, for your average, maybe 16 by 32 foot fiberglass pool, maybe kidney bean shape or so, you might be able to get away somewhere between the 60 and 80 range. The vinyl is going to be somewhere between 75 and 100 in terms of just basic cost. Now, every builder is different, but those are going to be some average ballpark numbers for the different types of pools. As far as timeline goes, depending on your location as well and the permitting process, the turnaround time from the time you give your first deposit until the time you're swimming in your pool can be anywhere between 6 to 12 months. And then also is dependent upon the type of pool you're building. Concrete pool obviously is going to take more time than a prefabricated fiberglass pool. Just weighing all of those options are really will really affect your costs.
All right. Bruce wants to know what's the best pool to have in Atlanta, saltwater or chlorine? And in terms of the construction type, vinyl, fiberglass, gunite, heated or not heated, and talk about it in terms of the overall cost, like a long-term cost on it.
So having been in the industry for over 12 years, I can tell you if you ask 5 different pool guys that question, you're going to get 5 strong opinions in all different directions.
There's 5 right exact ways.
Correct. The good news is there is no wrong way or no wrong answer in terms of what type of pool you want. My advice there is, consider what are your entertaining habits for you and your family, as far as, do you have children? Do you not have children and you just like to entertain your friends? Do you have children and maybe you have a lot of friends with children and so they're all coming over all the time? Or do you really just want the pool to be able to look at it, swim in occasionally? You just like the idea of a pool, right? So all of that's going to play a role in your decision-making process. I can tell you, if I were to build a pool in my backyard today, oddly, I will never probably build a pool, but if I were to build a pool, I would build a concrete pool because I know that the shell of the pool is, barring any earth movement issues, the shell of the pool is going to last a lifetime. I will have a pebble pool surface, so pebble tech or wet edge or stonescapes or something like that, because of the longevity aspect of pebble versus basic white marshite. Tile, there's an infinite number of tile options. Then you're not going to have any longevity issues with those. Coping, either travertine or flagstone, depending on whether I'm doing something more modern or more contemporary or traditional. I would probably have a pool and spa combo, because who doesn't want a spa, right? And then the equipment package that I choose will basically be either between a Pentair brand or a Janie brand and what's available at the time. I would include salt water. The nice thing about salt water, like I mentioned, is you don't have to worry about manually adding chlorine every single week. So if you go out of town, it's nice to know that your system is working for you and you don't have to find someone to add chlorine to your pool. Your system is doing it for you. So if you go away for 2 weeks, you'll come back and your pool will be dirty with leaves and dirt in the bottom of it, but it's not going to be green because it was still producing chlorine for you. Heated pool. Of course, I would have a heated pool so that I can extend my swim season. We're in Georgia, so you never really know what you're going to get in the springtime. We could have 90-degree days in February and then snow in April, or vice versa. It's really just kind of depends on what the weather's going to do for us. But having a heater on the pool is very beneficial in being able to maximize the usability of the pool throughout the year. And then the differences in types of heater, of course, will be varied upon your usage habits and how you intend to use the pool. But I would say that with a pool that's got a spa attached to it, you're always going to want to have a gas heater. And a gas heater is going to allow you to swim 24/7 year round. So I would say if I were to build a pool, that's how I would go. But that's, of course, based on my individual family needs and preferences. So.
Interesting. Daniel, who do you recommend for a builder or
So
installer?
great question. So right now we are recommending Atlantis Pool and Spa. Atlantis, like the classic underwater city. Atlanta Pools and Artistic Pools. Those are the three main builders that we generally recommend. All of them build high quality. Customer service, from my perspective with them, is phenomenal. Unfortunately, they can't make everybody happy, of course, so I'm sure there's probably an unsatisfied customer somewhere. But on the by and large, I would say that the majority of the customers that we maintain those pools for those companies after they're built, I know it's quality construction, and the homeowners have been thoroughly happy with their product.
Awesome. Sarah wants to know how much it costs to convert from chlorine to salt water, and can it be done on all the pool types?
Absolutely. Depending on the size of the pool will determine the size of the saltwater system that you need. So the average size pool in Atlanta is between 20 and 25,000 gallons of water. So for a pool of that size, you're going to want a salt system that can accommodate that volume of water. For sterilization and chlorination, I would expect to spend somewhere between $1,800 and $2,200, depending on the brand, make, model, etc. For a pool that is, 60,000, 100,000 gallons, we've got a few of those around town. Obviously, that cost is going to be getting up there closer to $3,000 or $4,000. A smaller pool, you probably get closer to $1,000.
All right. Somebody wanted to know the cost of the inspection. The discounted rate that we charge is $270. And Daniel already mentioned we can get you, he will rush them. We always tell people what the due diligence periods are. And I can't think of a recent one you couldn't hit their due diligence. So we seem to be hitting that pretty regularly.
Generally speaking, I think there was only one recently that I can think of. I can't believe that they did this, but they had a 1-day due diligence, and they signed their contract Friday, needed everything done by Saturday. I will say, I know Home Probe, they're generally available on weekends, but as a policy, I prioritize family time for all of my staff and employees, so we don't generally work weekends. But if we, with enough notice and if it's available, we can do a rush for potentially a Saturday inspection. I'm not sure what they charge for the rush fee. I know what we charge Home Pro, but I'm not sure what they're passing to the customer. But so if it's available, we can try to do one last minute, but that's still dependent upon staff availability. But in general, as long as we know the due diligence period, we do definitely try to accommodate, getting those inspections turned around quickly.
Awesome. Daniel, are you okay if I send out the 2 sample reports with the recording of this to people?
Absolutely.
All right, so Daisy,
I did
you'll be able to
redact
get
the
it.
personal information on them, but those are 2 actual inspection reports that Melanie's going to send out that we did. One of them was done, I think, earlier this month, and one was done in maybe March or February earlier this year. Maybe it was last year, perhaps. But they are 2 actual inspection reports that we did recently, for y'all to look at, compare and contrast, so you can kind of see what we do.
And I think I was surprisingly impressed with how thorough they are. And I'm just really impressed with how systematic and thorough they are. That's why we want people to work with you. Carlin says, does winterizing include emptying the pool?
So for a winterization process, the water level does get lowered in most pools. Depending on the pool will determine the amount of water that needs to be lowered, but you're never draining a pool entirely. You never really want to leave a pool empty, especially a vinyl pool. The vinyl liner actually counts on the weight of the water to keep it in place. If you drain a vinyl pool, you're going to see the liner kind of shrink up on itself. You're going to run into problems long term. But then with fiberglass and concrete pools, you want to have the weight of the water holding the pool down. Otherwise, you can run into problems with the pool literally popping up out of the ground like an empty bowl in a sink full of water. Generally speaking, on average, pools get lowered by about 12 inches of water or so from the top of the pool. So we're never draining it, but we are going to remove some water from the pool.
Cool. All right. Neil, yes, he does include estimates in the report for the concerns. And yep. Last question we had is, what is coping? You mentioned it a couple of times.
I want to answer that in a second. So we are a licensed contractor in the state of Georgia to work on swimming pools. So all of the repair costs that we give at the bottom of the inspection report, 99.9% of those repair costs, your client could then turn around and come back to us after they've moved into the home or acquired the home and say, hey, we want to move forward with all of this. And we honor those costs, generally speaking, for 30 or 60 days after the inspection date. So they don't even have to do anything other than say, hey, we want to move forward and get these repairs done. They sign the estimate and we get the ball rolling on that. So just make note of that as well. So they don't necessarily have to find another pool company. If they already know the cost, if they've had some concessions from the seller, they can easily just transfer that back to us and we get them taken care of. The coping. So there's 3 major components to the pool. I call them the big 3 when we look at renovating a pool. You have your plaster, which for concrete pools, for example, you have your finished plaster. That's your white surface that everybody sees, or the pebble surface or quartz or what have you. Then you have your waterline tile, and then you have your coping. So the coping is that 12-inch band that goes all the way around the pool, kind of looks like a skirt. It's flagstone, it's travertine, it's brick. Sometimes it's just a concrete apron. Maybe it's poured at the same time as the pool deck. So there's really not a definite distinction between the coping and the deck. But the coping for us is a 12-inch apron all the way around the pool. From the very edge of the pool, you measure 12 inches back and go all the way around. That's your coping. For a vinyl pool, the coping is going to be that, it's going to be that white, they're often bullnose, that white edge at the very top of the pool. And that actually is what hooks the liner in place and holds the liner in place.
All right. Speaking of liner, this is really the last question, and then I'll let you go.
Oh, no, that's okay. I'm here.
We learned so much. How long does a good vinyl liner last, and what does it cost to replace standard 16 by 32 rectangle-ish? I'm going to add ish.
So the average liner will last 10 to 15 years. I'd say 12 seems to be about the sweet spot. Now that being said, you're going to start noticing fading after about 5 to 7 years. from between the chemicals and the sun beating down on it. Vinyl is just a plastic material, keep in mind. And so what happens is over time, it becomes brittle. And eventually it's going to crack, develop holes, tears, rips, things like that. So after about 7 years, you're going to start noticing the fading pretty significantly. And after about 7 or 8 years, it's not going to be very aesthetic anymore, but it's going to be more functional and just keeping the water in the pool, right? The vinyl is a very thin material, so it does get damaged pretty easily. That's why it's a cheaper pool to install than concrete. So the average cost of a liner for a 16 by 32 or so, depending on what's needed, the type of liner, if you upgrade the liner material, the thickness, the manufacturer, I'd say an average cost for a liner of that size can be in the $4,000 range. Some companies maybe do it a little bit cheaper. Some companies are going to be a little bit more expensive. So it just really depends on the company. A company, for example, that doesn't do a whole lot of liners throughout the year, they're probably going to be more expensive than a company that specializes in liner replacement and then maybe do 100 liners a year. So they're able to offer cheaper prices by sheer volume that they do. Whereas someone who doesn't do them very often, they're probably going to be more expensive to make sure they cover their cost.
Very good. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody who was here. And Daniel, thank you so much. We learned a ton. And I think we can all talk to our clients a little better to prep them for what they can expect from you and from pool ownership. Everyone, I will send you the recording of this in case you weren't able to scribble down everything he said so fast, and we'll include those 2 sample inspection reports from Daniel. And Daniel, we will see you around Atlanta soon. Thank you so much.
And if anybody has any other specific questions, they are more than welcome to reach out to us, and I'm happy to walk them through any questions that they may have.
All right, cool beans. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.